livestock, holding and processing. The sign made Charlotte freeze for a second as she considered what it could possibly mean. Surely they weren't referring to the people as livestock. Charlotte couldn't think what else they would be talking about, and having seen how those people were herded into the building in the video. Oh my God. Charlotte whispered as she considered what this could mean. She shuddered and suddenly felt very out of her depth. Charlotte gasped and covered her mouth as she suddenly heard a door open and close from above, followed by heavy footsteps on the metal stairs. With nowhere else to go, and since she was unsure if the person was coming her way, Charlotte took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Closing it behind her as soon as she was inside, she pressed her ear against the door and tried to hear if the footsteps were coming her way. When Charlotte heard a door closing above her, she breathed a sigh of relief. Charlotte turned around to see the room she was in and gasped again. In front of her was a darkened concrete room with a large steel cage in the middle of it. The cage took up a huge portion of the center of the room and was packed with people. Mostly young adults in their 20s and 30s, and a few older people too. They were all in dirty clothes and looked like they had been there a while. The smell was very strong. There must have been at least 24 people in the cage, and none of them had turned to see Charlotte. She didn't know if they hadn't noticed her enter or were just totally apathetic to everything going on around them. Eventually, one young man who looked no older than Charlotte looked up and saw her. "You don't work here," the man said in a combination of shock and confusion. "No. I'm a journalist," Charlotte replied quietly as she walked forwards with wide eyes. "What's going on here?" I don't know," the man said as he scrambled to his feet and pushed against the bars. "I was brought here last night. I was out jogging and the next thing I knew I woke up in here. Help us, please." Charlotte looked around but saw no way to release the large steel door that was keeping everyone locked in. Charlotte's mind raced, but the most important part was working out what was going on and documenting everything. She could spread the word about this place and be the hero later. "What are they doing with you?" Charlotte asked as she took pictures. I don't know. Just get us out," the guy responded, getting hysterical. "Listen," Charlotte said strongly as she indicated that the man should quieten down. "There is no way for me to get you out, but if I can figure out what is going on, I can get the authorities here really soon. I just need information." "I don't know. All I know is that they come in occasionally and take us through those doors." The man pointed to the opposite end of the room. Charlotte nodded and hurried around the other side of the room. There was a big pair of double doors that were very scuffed. It looked as if the doors had been used a lot and there were signs of struggle and damage all over it. Charlotte couldn't hear any sounds through the door, so she pushed it open with trepidation and stepped into a dark corridor. She walked down the cold and forbidding hallway until she reached the far end where there were 2 doors. One of the doors was marked boys and the other was marked girls. "Don't leave us." The doors behind Charlotte were still open and she turned to see the man she had been talking to before pushed against the bars with a desperate look on his face. Charlotte felt instant sympathy for him and all the others that were trapped in that cell. "Don't worry," Charlotte replied with a weak smile. "I'll be right back and I'll get you out." Charlotte felt a little like a superhero at this point. She had already decided to forget about a newspaper article. This story could be its own book. The Pulitzer Prize could wait. Charlotte was envisaging the New York Times bestseller list now. With a deep breath to steady her nerves, Charlotte pushed on the door and walked through into the dark room beyond. The only light seemed to be coming from the corridor behind her, and it was almost pitch black. Despite her misgivings, Charlotte stepped further inside and strained her eyes to try and see where she was. With no warning and a loud echoing sound that must have woken up the whole factory, the door Charlotte had walked through slammed shut. Charlotte let out a shrill scream at the unexpected noise as she spun around and ran back to the door. Charlotte felt along the door but couldn't feel a handle or any other way to wrench the door open. It was a very smooth surface and the scared journalist couldn't find any way to open it. She swore under her breath repeatedly as she started panicking. From somewhere above her, Charlotte heard something like a generator starting up. She looked up at the ceiling just as lights started clicking on along the ceiling. Charlotte had to shield her eyes until they adjusted to the new light level, and when she could finally see the door she had been trying to wrench open, she saw there was no way to open it from here without a key card. With a shiver of foreboding, Charlotte realized that there was no way back now, she could only move forward. Turning back to face the room at large was no more welcoming for the young woman, as it was empty except for a conveyor belt with a board at the end of it. The belt disappeared through a hole in the wall. When it didn't seem like anything else was happening, Charlotte walked slowly forward to examine the conveyor. When she looked through the hole in the wall, she saw that it curved out of view with no idea where it led.